So there's one defense that most people are not aware of against e4 and the Ruy Lopez, and I'm gonna feature in a few traps just to make this study exciting. So let's say white starts with e4, and then you go pawn to e5, then knight f3 and knight c6. So at this point you are expecting your opponent to play bishop c4, but all of a sudden, there you see bishop b5. I hate the Ruy Lopez. I mean, nobody likes the Ruy Lopez. It's boring, drawish, and non-committal. So instead of responding with the Berlin defense or the Murphy defense, which are two common responses that Spanish players expect to see, I propose you respond with knight ge7, known as the Cozio defense. This is very much playable at all levels, even in classical tournaments, rapid, blitz, and bullet. Now, before I show you some traps and tricks, allow me to establish the theory behind this opening. This structure on the board, where the queen's knight is on c6 and the king's knight is on e7, resembles the structure that we get in the Scotch Gambit. The only difference is, in the Cozio defense, our dark squared bishop is still on f8 and it's not happy at all. While in the Scotch Gambit, we only play knight ge7 after putting our dark squared bishop on b6 like this. For example, after e4, we go e5, knight f3, knight c6, d4, pawn takes, then bishop c4, the Scotch Gambit, where we go bishop b4 check, and then after c3, we take, and after pawn takes, we go bishop a5, castle shot by white, bishop b6. So all this is theory, guys. It's all known. From here, bishop a3 is the main book line, after which you now go knight ge7, this move that we play by move number 3 in the Cozio defense. So you can see the difference. In the Scotch Gambit, we only play knight ge7 once our dark squared bishop is on b6, which is a plus, so that after anything, we now castle shot and consider playing h6 next. But in the Cozio defense, we rush with knight ge7 first and temporarily hurt our dark squared bishop, so that after a few moves, we may fianchetto our dark squared bishop and castle shot like this, or go knight g6, double defending this pawn, and after something like d4, this is when we take. If bishop takes, by the way, we can just take. And after knight takes d4, we then play bishop c5. By the way, if knight takes c6, we don't take with our d pawn to avoid an early queen exchange, but we rather take with our b pawn, attacking this bishop with tempo. If bishop c4, by the way, that allows us to go pawn to d5, and then castle shot to set up this little trap of sacrificing our bishop on f2 with check, knowing that white can take because of queen takes d1 check, and if queen takes f2, we can simply go queen h4 check, forcing the king to go back, after which we gladly take the bishop. Next, this pawn will be the target, and let's just say white doesn't take our c pawn, because that allows us to sacrifice on f2. If they play the theoretical move bishop e3, challenging our dark squared bishop, what the best you can do is just to retreat your dark squared bishop on d6, knowing that white doesn't have dc even this time because of this little trap. Once again, queen h4, intending to checkmate. In this position, white will just end up losing a free piece. Maybe the best they can do is to go pawn to f4, allowing you to take a free pawn, getting back your free pawn. By the way, g3 doesn't work due to the same tactic that we saw earlier. Or let's say white develops his knight anywhere, let's say on c3, not attending to this problem. This can even lead to mate in 4, beginning with knight e2 check. White's king can't escape from Sobibo, so white has to take that knight, and then you take on h2 with your bishop check. Again, there's no escaping from Sobibo, so king h1 is forced, after which you play bishop g3 with discovery check, king g1, and then queen h2 checkmate. So what we are saying is white just has to take on f4 to avoid checkmate. I mean, even queen e1 doesn't work due to the same checkmate sequence. After bishop takes h2 check, king h1, then bishop g3 check, and then this. So all in all, white just has to attend to this knight. It's not easy, so you will see most of your opponents taking that knight, because what else can they do? And then this is when you take, and again we're going to have the same checkmate sequence coming, and so the rook has to die, then you take that rook. At the end of the day, we are just up an exchange with a superior position and a favorable pawn structure. Just go queen e4 and they won't be able to defend this pawn. And there's no bishop d5, by the way. You can give a check, or better go queen b4 as if you want to take this pawn. And once the bishop goes back, you go queen b6 or queen c5 check and win back that pawn. Or if pawn to b3, go bishop e6, and if takes, you can simply open the f file for your rook, and there's little that white can do in this position. For example, they can't even develop their knight successfully due to rook ad8. You see what I was talking about? Nothing that white can do. This is game over. So this is one trap that you need to master with all your eyeballs in the Cozio defense. And that's the main idea of knight g6. Worthy to remember. So in all the variations, there is no d takes c6 by white after you cast a shot. In fact, after bishop e3 and bishop d6, theory says instead of taking, it's better for white to play pawn to g3 and not taking this pawn. I mean, even knight c3 can be met with this move, queen h4 check, and there's this problem. Again, we're going to be doing the same things where you take on f4 with your knight, and this, I mean, things are just bad. There's still nothing that white can do to stop this mating sequence. And so the only move that Stockfish suggests instead of taking on knight c3 is pawn to g3, just avoiding queen h4. And you still want to fix this, right? So here is how you fix this arrangement. Here you sacrificed a pawn for activity. How do you get back this pawn? You don't even need to get it back because your position is more superior. Just go knight e5, attacking something, and once the bishop goes back, look at all these open lines that you have. I mean, you don't even need to get back this pawn, just like in the two knights defense or the Scotch Gambit, where you don't need a pawn to continue with the attack. This is very much playable even in standard chess. So I'll play bishop h3 here, attacking this rook. White has to let go of this rook, otherwise rook e1 can be met with. There's no pawn to f3, by the way. We are attacking this queen. So the queen has to move. Worse off, if the queen moves to d2 or to d4, you have knight f3 check to win that queen. So the only move is queen c1, after which you go knight to f, and then next, you simply win that rook. It's almost not advisable for white to mess with this pawn. After pawn to d5 and pawn takes, just remember to put your king to safety first and wait for white to blunder because you have queen h4. So cast short is the key move, and then you get back your pawn later. Sometimes after you cast a short and then white doesn't take or play bishop e3, which we just saw, if they play something else like knight to c3, once again you can just go queen h4, attacking this bishop indirectly, followed by bishop d6. If white plays bishop e2, because that's what they like doing, again, don't just pay attention to this pawn. Don't even bother to take back this pawn. One secret is to let white take you and accept being down a pawn for activity. So if I were you, I would play something like rook e8, centralizing my rook. If pawn to g3, I can go queen h3 if I want, and someday I may even consider to sack my knight. Just kidding. The thing is, in almost all the variations, d takes c6 just opens up many attacking opportunities for black, and the secret is just to start attacking, putting all your pieces on the most active squares. For example, you can even sack your rook on e2 in this position. This is not going to mate because you can simply defend like this, and after knight takes e2, look at this. You want to win white's queen on d8 with tempo. So the way I'll do this is by taking on f1 first, and that's check. The king has to take, and then I go bishop h3 check. We saw that if white castles short, which is the top played move, the whole idea is to put our king's knight on g6. I just like this line, and this is where we saw this pawn to d4 move where you have to take and go bishop c5, then castle short and start waiting for those traps. But the top played move in this position is not d4. d4 is just an aggressive move. The top played move is pawn to c3. Actually, they want to have two pawns on the center. So against this, you can even go back to your Murphy defense line, starting with a6, and if bishop a4, this is when you go pawn to d5 or even pawn to d6, it doesn't matter, but let's just say d6. And then d4, seeing this move coming, you play bishop d7, and if they take, you can simply take back with your d pawn, not your knight. If bishop e3, a theoretical move, you can go bishop e7 or bishop d6 just to be sure. And then after anything, I can simply castle short and life continues. So you can see by playing this simple Cozio defense how we avoided tons of theories in the Ruy Lopez to do with the d4 square. I mean, not allowing the game to be boring anymore. Now this is a sharp game where the best player has to win. You have bishop d6 coming, you have pawn to f5 coming, and king h8, pawn to f5, exchange. I mean, this is so much fun than the usual Berlin defense in my opinion. So that's how the traditional Cozio defense is played at the top level. Again, just remember to go knight ge, deal done. The other plan is to put this knight on c6. period. But how do we get rid of this knight in order to put our king's knight on c6? So the strategy will be to trade off our queen's knight on d4 with white's king's knight and then put our knight on c6. Let's do that. Let's say white castles short or plays something like knight c3. Just as an example, here we can play a prophylactic move to test white's patience first, pawn to a6, because we'll be happy to see them taking our knight so that we can successfully replace our king's knight on c6. Next we'll play bishop c5, pawn to d6, h6, and castle short, game over. But what if white doesn't take after we play pawn to s6? Well, in this case they like playing bishop a4 or bishop c4 or the same. Now this is when we can go pawn to d6. But what if they play pawn to d4? Thank you. Now this is when we can get rid of our queen's knight, so that after white takes, we take back with our e-pawn, and then queen takes, then we successfully put our king's knight on c6 like this with tempo, and after queen e3 we simply play bishop e7 and castle short. See how we simplified things and ran away from theory. Most of the times white likes playing bishop d2 so that they may castle long after you castle short. So once you see this intention, it's better to wait. You don't want to castle before white. That's just a general rule in chess. So you also play bishop e6. If bishop takes, you simply take with your f, still waiting to see where white wants to castle short. If they go short, you also go short. If they go long, you also go long. So at this point, let's say white plays pawn to f4. We can play a waiting move like queen d7 here, waiting to see what they want to do. If they castle short, this is when we can castle short as well. So don't even be afraid of ghosts. Just do your thing, delay castling, and see what white is up to. So now let's say white tries to complicate things after pawn to f. Let's say they go bishop a4, and then after pawn to d6, normal move. They go pawn to d4, quite alright. Knowing that this time you can't take on d4 with your knight, well, first you can go pawn to b5. That's the thing. And after bishop b3, this is when you do your thing. After knight takes, you take back. And after queen takes, wait a second guys, this is a must-know trap called the Noah's Ark that every chess player must know. In this position, we can easily win this bishop right away with the move pawn to c5, attacking the queen first, and after queen d3 or queen e3, whatever they play, then you go pawn to c4. Very similar to the actual Noah's Ark trap, and you should know this. The light squared bishop is dead. Anyway, instead of queen takes d4 right away to allow your Noah's Ark trap, if white goes queen h5, this is when you can play knight g6 and continue with your normal development. You still have pawn to c5 and c4. Now last line, just to ensure that you are well equipped, say after bishop g5, knight ge7, what if white tries to be super complicated by going pawn to c3? So now we've seen that we don't have this strategy of replacing our king's knight on c6. Well, once again, you can start with a6, testing white's patience. If bishop c4, you can just go pawn to d5 right away, allowing this trade to happen because this is only good for black. Queen e2, knight f4, or even bishop d6, that's okay. And this knight f4 move is also playable. Even if they castle short right away, you can go knight f4 if you want. Or start with bishop e6 first. If rook e1 is played, attacking this pawn twice, you can go bishop d6, or even better queen d6, because you want to castle long and start attacking on the king's side as soon as you can. In fact, queen d6 is the best move here, not bishop d6, because after pawn to d4, you can simply take, and after they take, you take, simplifying the game. And after queen takes, this is when you castle long. Castling long in the Cozio defense seems to be profitable for black, period. So this is another secret, you guys. Be on the lookout for these strategies in your games. Again, after pawn to c3 stopping you, from going knight d4, you can just remember to go pawn to a6 first. a6 is always a cool prophylactic move in the Ruy Lopez. You can play it anytime you want, as long as white's light squared bishop is on b5. It's just a waiting move, really. It also prepares for pawn to b5 in the near future, given a chance. E.g. after bishop a4, you can consider this move, but not just yet. Knowing that you don't have this strategy, this is when you can go back to the first strategy that I showed you of putting your knight on g6, because you know that pawn to d4 won't hurt. At best, you can just take. That's all. In fact, at this stage, where your two knights are both protecting your e5 pawn, never think of playing b5, pawn to d6. It doesn't work properly. The best you can do is just to get rid of your e-pawn. Just open the e-file for your king's rook. So the best you can do here is just to take. The same thing you do even in the Scotch Gambit. The idea is that after white takes back, You now go bishop b4 check, same strategy with the Scotch Gambit, so that after bishop d2, you can simply take or put your king to safety first. By the way, there is no bishop takes c6 because you can first of all take with check and then open up the center for your queen. But if bishop takes, you can just take with a knight. And say after pawn to a3, you simply go back. This can't harm us. I mean, we are okay. If knight takes, and pawn to f4, think of this as an overextension. There are so many weaknesses that white is leaving, and one trick is to go pawn to b5 here, deliberately giving up your knight, because it's always good to get rid of that bishop. But you can just retreat your knight back to g6 if you want to, counterattacking this pawn. f5 would be very bad, as that will allow this beautiful outpost for your knight. Say castle short, and now you can go pawn to b5. That's the whole purpose, or the main reason why we played a6 earlier, and I talked about this. If bishop c2, you go pawn to d6. These pawns are not going anywhere. Apart from this idea and putting your king's knight on g6, the last thing you want to keep in mind is you always have pawn to d5 whenever you run out of moves. For example, after c3, a6, and bishop c4, you don't know what to do. Even though you can play knight g6 and continue with life, in this position, you can even go pawn to d5 right away. And this is okay, this is still good. And this also works in the bishop a4 line. Pawn to d5 is also very much playable. I'm just showing you what to do. If you think knight takes e5 becomes possible, you simply have this in-between move, pawn to b5, to get rid of white's bishop pair in exchange for a pawn. If bishop b3, you take the free knight. So white has to take your knight, and then you take back with your king's knight. And this is another way of achieving this. So I just wanted to show you that pawn to d5 is also playable in case you run out of moves or you doubt playing this move. I mean, bishop b3 or bishop c2 doesn't make sense. You don't even have to take because you're going to help white activate his pieces. Here you can even play pawn to d4. Lastly, after playing knight e7, instead of white castling short or playing knight c3 or c3, they may also play pawn to d3, like what they call the anti-Berlin defense when your king's knight is on f6. In this anti-Berlin defense structure, this is where you can consider going for the second option if you want, or just continue with knight g6. By the way, I said, as long as white's bishop is on b5, you're always at liberty of going pawn to s6 first, just to test white's patience, because you'd love your king's knight to sit on c6. If bishop a4 or bishop c4, once again, you can go pawn to d5. Don't doubt this move. Given a chance, or if you have to, just go for it. Another strategy is just to go knight g6. We saw how that works, but you have to use your mind, because if you play knight g6 in this position, you lose immediately due to knight g5. These are well-known tactics that you should get used to. Some kind of the fried liver arrangement here. So take your time in the opening stage and try to examine the errors. You don't just have to play like a robot. So this is where d5 becomes handy. Instead of going knight g6 and allow knight g5 by white, this is where pawn to d5 becomes very important. That's why I dedicated this chapter for pawn to d5 alone. The idea is that after pawn takes, you just take back. You have no weaknesses at all. Okay, you know what? Let's just try to complicate things a little bit. Let's say white doesn't take, but rather goes queen e2, double attacking your e5 pawn. Well, in this case, you can simply go bishop g4, pinning this knight to the queen. If bishop takes, well and good. Let's say pawn to h3. Well, taking would activate white's queen on a better square, double attacking your knight, but this is also fine. You can just retreat your knight back to f6 and continue with the normal development, or bishop e7 even better than castle short. I don't see any problem with this, but just to avoid tactics, you can just play bishop h5. g4, bishop g6. Say, Caspar, but white can now take this free pawn. Well, there are tactics involved, you guys. There's knight d4 attacking this queen. Okay, what happens if white plays knight c6 check, attacking our queen? Well, that's the idea. We take the queen first, and after knight takes, white's knight on d8 is nearly trapped. So here we can play knight d4 first. The only sensible move for white is knight takes b7 here. Let's say bishop takes. We can just say knight takes c2 check, and after king d1 or king d2, this is when we take, attacking this bishop as well. So bishop takes is not a good idea after we play knight d4. The best white can do is just to take the b7 pawn, after which we still go knight takes c2, wanting to win this. And after king d1, rather than taking right away, we first rescue our other knight, and say after pawn to a3, we want our knight to die with dignity, so taking on d3 makes a lot of sense. We just want a free pawn. White can't take this anyways, because even after they take, we have knight takes f2 check, discovery, and next we're going to win this rook. So tactics is another reason why I love playing the Cozio defense. Anyway, so once again, in the d3 line, you can still go pawn to d5 right here, or after you play pawn to a6, so that after bishop c4, you immediately go pawn to d5, allowing this trade to happen. And even if they don't play queen e2, but say cast a shot to put their king to safety, the key in this position is to somehow unpin your d knight, putting it on b6 as if you want to take this bishop. If they play something else, you just take, because this will come with the defense. So they have to play bishop b3, the top played move. And now, noticing this, you realize that you have time to pin this knight. There's no taking on e5. Say pawn to h3. You go bishop h5, inviting this weakness to come, because in the near future you can even castle long. So say rook e1 in this position, pause a little bit and think about this position. You will see that bishop d6 loses on the spot due to this little tactic, and these are some small tactics that kill a lot of people. The queen is attacking the bishop, right? If you take, there is knight takes c6 check. White is going to win your queen with tempo and take that bishop. So you don't have to rush with these moves. That's why in the Ruy Lopez, I propose playing slowly in the opening stage, but not very slow, just understanding the position. So in this position, I would play something like queen e7. Why? Because this time, if knight takes, I can simply take back with my knight, right? In fact, if knight takes, I don't even have to take, because there's no check coming after bishop takes d1. There is no check, I'll just take. So queen e7 just defends this pawn and opens up another opportunity to castle long, which is what we do in the Cozio defense most of the times. I think I have covered some of the most important lines that you need to know in the Cozio defense, unless otherwise, or unless your opponent plays a novelty. But in case of novelties and other weird lines, you can just make use of the middle game principles and sometimes use your basic chess skills to calculate which piece needs to be out and which piece you have to keep on the board. Right, once again, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to this channel, and don't forget to share if you can. That's how you support KaspaChess. Guys, nothing much can be said. Until next time, have a wonderful day. Bye bye.